Hey everybody, Model Man Tom here. So here's the next step in the processor, CPU, case, build, computer thing going on. Before you put the motherboard in the case, the first thing you got to do is put the processor on the motherboard and also put the fan on the processor. So what we have here, this is called a ZIF socket, zero insertion force. And basically this lever here does all the work for you. It's got a nice little clamp on the side there, and once that lifts up it releases the locking mechanism there, and we can flip this clamp up. All motherboards come with a little protective plastic case to keep the pins from getting messed up at all. And there we go. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? 3 billion of them in this case, spread across 4 cores, hyper-threaded for 8. Here's the processor itself. Now, every processor is notched. Oh, let's talk about something important here. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, touch any of these. At worst, you'll bend one of these pins and the chip is over with. At best, you'll get oil from your fingers on them and you'll have a bad connection and you'll never get as good a speed as you could. So when you're handling this, always handle it by the edges. Technically, I should have an anti-static strap on my wrist, and probably even wearing some gloves here would also be good. So what we're going to do here is line up the notches. Let's get some nice close focus here. So there's 2 notches, one here and one here, and on the board here there's a notch there and a notch there, and what we're going to do is simply drop it into place. It should sit firmly, and it does seem to be. It's not wiggling around at all. It looks like I got a little bit of a fingerprint there. Now in this case, you also really don't want to mess up the top of the processor either with oils and stuff, because between the processor and the CPU fan there is the actual cooling element, and there's something called thermal paste on that, which is basically a grease which helps conduct all the heat away from the chip. I'll show you that when we get to it. So right now all I've done, the processor is in, drop this over that, and then as you push this lever down, the CPU is now fully seated with no problems. Sorry about that soft focus there, this camera is driving me nuts. So now what we'll do is get out the CPU fan wherever I put that, and I thought it was close by. Here it is. So every fan is different and has its own thing about it. In this case, this is a simple, you push in, and if you want to release it, you twist this knob around and that releases it. But otherwise what we're going to do, it doesn't matter which direction this goes down, and here you can see there's a copper core where this is what conducts all the heat away and into the aluminum radiators here, and then of course there's the fan on top. If you're going to overclock your computer, then the stock fan is no good. You need a special high performance fan. So what we're going to do here, and of course this here is the thermal grease. If you're applying your own, it's a trick, but in some cases it will be pre-applied to the copper core like as it is here. And if you put too much of your own on, you'll get a bad connection and the CPU will overheat because it's not conducting as well as it could. If you put too little on, then you don't get a good connection, the CPU overheats, and you don't get as good a connection as you could. And if you put it on lumpy, smeared around, you get an uneven connection, which means the CPU is going to overheat and the connection is not going to be good. So that is definitely a bit of a trick, and when it comes pre-applied like this, that's definitely a nice situation. Now the CPU directions say to push one of these pegs in, push one and then the far corner, then opposite corners basically, one at a time. The motherboard directions say to do opposite corners simultaneously. First, what we'll do is kind of make sure just the tabs are in place, and then I'll actually drop it on the CPU. And this one not quite in place maybe. This is one circumstance where it's generally speaking okay to lift the board up. Putting the CPU in, you definitely want to do that on something. There we go. Just needed a little extra. And in this case, do not be afraid to hold both sides and make sure. The battery just cut out there real quick. Basically, I'm holding the board right underneath the CPU, and without flexing the board itself, you want to press each one of these pins and make sure that they're solidly in there. Then flip it over and have a look. If the CPU fan is not connected as tight as it can be, what'll happen is the fan will start to wobble around. It probably can't fly loose all by itself and cause chaos, but if this is shaking around, it's going to be a really bad situation. At worst, it could fall off if you didn't seat it right and then fall into the case. Your CPU immediately overheats, you shut down, and look for damage that you just did. At best, it's going to shake around, you're not going to get a good connection with the CPU, it's going to overheat, you're going to shut down, and you're going to have to reseat the fan. So I'm pretty happy with this the way it is, and that's really all there is to putting the CPU in. Can't say that it's much more difficult than that. As a bonus, why not throw some RAM in here real quick, since we're at it. Actually, RAM is its own special case, and there are a couple particulars about it that we will have to follow, so I'll save that for another video and just close this one up by saying at this point it's relatively safe to pick the entire motherboard up by the CPU fan. You never want to touch any of the other fans that are on there if you do have any, or pick them up by the heat sinks. If you pick it up by an edge, pick it up by both edges, and never touch any exposed leads such as those here. Don't get your fingerprints in the RAM, and generally absolutely keep clean hands beforehand. You really don't want any smears of any kind on here. So that's pretty much it for the CPU. So take a look for the next one, and I'll probably pop this into the case. Thanks for watching. See ya.